Hey everybody, welcome to the show. I'm your host Sandman. Today we're going to be talking about cutaway locks. Let's get into it. What is the purpose of a cutaway lock? Why do people collect them? Why are they so expensive? I think that there's three different tiers of a cutaway lock personally. And this isn't going to include the clear acrylic locks just yet. The first example of cutaway locks is we have what's called factory cutaway locks. And then we have the enthusiast level cutaway locks. And then we have the locks that are somewhere in between, that they're just a really professional level of a cutaway lock. The manufacturer cutaways, such as this one from Schlage, these are requested by Schlage to be made at the factory so that they can explore and show the inner workings of a particular lock, such as this Schlage Primus. A Schlage Primus has finger pins that must be rotated and lifted to the shear line, as well as the key pins and driver pins that have to be lifted as well. This is a hard thing to conceptualize, to tell people that there's two sets of pins, or two rows of pins that have to be manipulated at the same time with a key. Another idea is this Corbin Rustwin Imhart. This is an Imhart. These pins, these key pins here, interlock with the driver pins. They rotate and then they actually interlock with the driver pins. If I can hold that steady there and get focused. Look at that. Look at the top of the key pin. It's almost like it's corrugated, and then the driver pin is T-shaped. Is that better in that light? Check that out. It's really hard to tell people that the pins rotate and then interlock with the driver pins. It's very hard to do that without a cutaway. That is a good example of a factory cutaway, or the purpose of a cutaway. Not just to see the inner workings of a lock, but understand the security features and how they actually function with the key. So, where does that bring us to today? Well, 10 to 15 years ago, factory cutaways were so rare and highly sought after. It was extremely hard to find. The average price for a factory cutaway would have been $300 on the low end, and as much as $1,200 to $1,500 on the high end. A lot of factory cutaways came with displays. They came with presentation boxes. It was something that may have been sitting on a CEO's desk, you know, like a high-ranking, company man that worked for Schlage or Medico, and maybe he might have been presented with a lock that maybe he might have been a part of or helped design. These cutaway locks are really highly coveted within our community of locksport and in locksmithing. Sometimes you get what's called dealer locks, or dealer cutaways, which were to be put on display on a locksmith bench top so he can show the customers the security features, and those are just as good, but they were never in like a presentation box with felt or anything like that. That's how a lot of factory cutaways came. They were extremely rare, extremely, just highly sought after in the community. But then people started making their own cutaways as the hobby and the sport grew. First, we started seeing Dremel jobs, people taking a Dremel tool and just absolutely slaughtering the body of a lock, and then eventually drilling into the core. And typically a lock body could be steel or aluminum or brass, but then you get into the core and the core is almost copper or brass. And once you've gotten into the core, then you can see the plug or the inner workings and the mechanism of that lock. And this one here was hobby made by somebody. It's a Master 178, very similar to 175. Then people started getting into the hobby of purchasing higher end CNC machines and hobby making cutaway locks, like this one here that I purchased about 10 years ago. This one was probably made on a CNC machine that probably cost anywhere between $2,500 to maybe $10,000 at that time. That's high end in my book, but there are better locks to be made out there. The difference between this is these have sharp edges and only so much is cut away, but they did cut away the cylinder here and a bit of the plug, so you can actually see quite a bit of what is going on. But then we have individuals like Lockcracker, who are well known in our community, that created cutaway locks, such as this MultiLock MT5. This was made on a CNC machine that I dare I say was a $100,000 CNC machine. I mean, it's a professional grade CNC machine. And Lockcracker was a craftsman who fell in love with the hobby of locksport and started offering locks to the community like this around 2014, 2015. This is Lockcracker's name. I will provide that down in the description below as well. If you try to Google this gentleman, he's no longer a part of the community, but he is still a CNC operator. And he does have plans of locks coming out into the future. It is really hard to research that gentleman because of the spelling of this name, but if you type this in or Lockcracker Cutaway, you'll come up with something eventually. I have 5 of Lockcracker's locks. Lockcracker made this multi-lock right here. He made this American L50, which is a double-sided wafer lock. He made this Series 5570, which is pretty much just a 5200 American padlock. He did this Best lock right here. That's not in focus, I apologize. He did this Best lock over here as well. It's just a 7-pin Best core, interchangeable core. And he also provided the Corbin Russwin in heart right here and keys for everything. I hope everything is in focus. I apologize. Are these worth the money? Are they worth your time? I think so. I enjoy collecting them, but they're not for what people are really going to think that they're for. They're for collecting. They're not really for learning on. Sparrows, the company Sparrows, based out of Canada, put in their hat into the mix, and they came out with these cutaway locks, these practice locks right here. And this is their idea of a cutaway lock, and I think it's a wonderful addition to my collection, but there are some shortcomings and fallbacks. If we look at this particular lock, it has what's called flashing, where if you try to cut away metal, there's going to be extra metal that's exposed over here on this side. If we can get this thing to focus. The problem with that is, anytime you make a cutaway lock, you risk losing the tolerances that are required to allow the pen stack to operate normally. So anytime I've ever tried to use some of the Sparrows cutaways, I've had a little bit of problem due to the type of security pins that I have installed in the lock. Now, all Sparrows do that. I think Sparrows makes a wonderful product, but if you try to pick this particular lock, and this was purchased about 10 years ago, but or I should say 7 years ago, but if I were to try to pick this one, if you look at the flashing here on this 5th security pin, the spool pin, that bottom of my spool driver pin interacts with that flashing, and therefore I'm not able to actually pick this lock, but the key works just fine. But the concept of trying to pick a spool pin requires that pin to move in different directions, left and right, fore and aft, and it will eventually rub up against that flashing. So you really have to have a really tight CNC machining process to put out a quality product overall. A couple other Sparrows products are these key and knob cylinders that they had made a while back. These are definitely probably at least 10 years old. And this one has the spool pins, this has the serrated pins. You cannot find these anymore. So they are fun for collecting. And then you started getting the Chinese equivalent of our cutaway locks, and the Chinese wanting to put in their 2 cents of what they thought would be a good idea that would sell. And these do sell. A lot of people are buying these cutaway locks with their first lockpick set. Due to the popularity of the cutaways and the growing of the sport, we've seen these acrylic locks grow, which is, to my knowledge, is this the same lock just about? It looks similar, but it's a little bit different. We've seen these acrylic locks, we've seen them in tubular, and we've seen them in Euro profile cylinders. We've also seen them in the escapology world. If you are into picking handcuffs or manipulating handcuffs, these are also very popular as well. These are a cutaway, but they're also considered an acrylic because they are see-through. Where am I getting at with all this? Should this be something you invest in? First, you need to understand the concept that when we are picking a cutaway lock, we cannot actually see the inner workings of the lock. If I were to take any of these locks, except for this one, and I try to pick it in my hand, I cannot see the inner workings of the lock. It's just, I can't see it. If I put this lock in a vise, I can't see it. I could hold it right here and try to pick and see how my pick interacts with the pins, but it's really hard to manipulate the tension wrench, whether it be top of keyway or bottom of keyway, while holding onto the lock. it's just not that practical for learning, in my opinion. I love Cutaway locks. I want to keep my collection growing, but I don't want to push people in a direction when they're starting out and say, you should buy a Cutaway lock to learn how to pick locks. I don't think Cutaway locks teach you how to pick locks. I think picking locks teaches you how to pick locks. I think Cutaway locks are just really wonderful conversation pieces. I think they're beautiful works of art that show you the inner workings of that particular puzzle. There are so many cutaways I want to add to my collection. Right now on my radar is the Covert Instruments Cutaway lock. It is a beautiful lock. I believe it's a pack lock that they have Cutaway with the Covert Instruments logo on it. There are so many beautiful things out there to collect, but we need to understand that they will not necessarily make us a better lock picker. One thing that could make us a better lock picker is an actual lock design, such as this. This is no longer available. I purchased this in 2015, 2016. And this was made by octosavvy.com, octosavvi.com. This gentleman no longer makes these. This was very difficult for him to produce. But these are a wonderful example of how a lock actually works. This is really amazing for teaching people how locks work. And if you are trying to learn how to pick a lock, or if you want to teach somebody how to pick a lock, something like this is suggested. But since that's no longer available, I would highly recommend the 3D locksport 3D printed lock. This thing right here is awesome. It does the same thing, just 3D printed. It was a lot more affordable for them to make. And when you purchase this, it comes with spool pins, driver key. It comes with wafer pins, a T-pin, serrated mushroom spool. If you want to learn how to pick a lock, this will teach you how to pick a lock. These won't. These will just show you the inner workings of the locks. There's really not much else I can say about this topic. I really love collecting these things. Some of these are very expensive. This one right here was probably about $350. The other lock cracker locks range from $150 to $250. There's more that I want to add to my collection. There's nothing on the market right now that I want to suggest anybody go out and buy. I do think that Covert Instruments offers a solid product with their Cutaway. I'm looking forward to adding that to my collection. I think if you were to try to buy a Cutaway lock on the market today, I would highly recommend covertinstruments.com. They seem to have the best ones on the market so far. But if you are looking to learn how to pick a lock, just buy a padlock. I know that Covert Instruments also, because I'm mentioning a lot, they also sell cylinders, Schlage SE1 type cylinders. You can go on Amazon, buy Packlock. You can buy American 1100s. There are so many options out there that are actually going to teach you how to pick a lock. They're really just for collecting purposes. But thank you all so much for your time. I didn't know what else to add in this review other than just that they're wonderful to collect, but they're not going to solve all your problems. But if you see them on the market, now you know, are they a factory cutaway? Is this an amateur cutaway cut out by a drill? Was it made by a CNC machine? Was it a high quality CNC machine with beveled edges? That's up for you to decide and for where your wallet lies. Let me know down in the comments though, what do you think of Cutaway locks? I want to know, does anybody else collect any? Does anybody else in the comments or that watches my videos, do any of you have any lock cracker cutaways? Or is there a vendor other than Covert Instruments that offers Cutaway locks at this time? Outside of Sparrows as well. Let me know down in the comments. I'd love to add more to my collection. Thank you all so much for watching.